Well, it's Friday night. We're just a little early tonight.
We are a little bit early tonight. Thank you. Thanks for being able to jump on a little bit early. That's great. Um, and welcome back
Yeah,
from
thanks. Yeah.
your what are we going to call this? Your escapade
Campeche.
in Campeche.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so awesome that you did that race. It has been on my list for so many years,
yeah.
mostly because Southwest Airlines flies there.
Oh, okay, okay.
And we have all these like Southwest airline points. I'm like, well, that's just an easy race we could just go down and do. So I'm so glad you went, and now you can kind of give us a little bit of of your perspectives on it. I didn't really realize how hot it was going to be. So how hot was it, first of all?
When I did the research on the race, I saw that this time of year it's typically low, maybe mid 80s, and maybe 50% humidity. Because you know me, I don't do well in hot and humid, but I also don't want to be afraid of racing in hot and humid. And so I wasn't that overly worried about it, given the history of the race. But then I started watching the weather, and the weather just started. It's the temperatures just kept going up, and all of a sudden it was predicting 97 and 80% humidity, and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a killer. But again, you can't you can't not race certain races, and it I already signed up, and so it was all just a matter of now what do I do to prep for that. On race day, my bike computer did register 99
Woo.
at about halfway through the bike ride. So that was the hottest that it read. Well, actually, it read 117, but that was why it
Was
was,
it sitting there?
yeah, just sitting on direct sun. So, in
I
the
hope it wasn't
transition area.
117.
What's that?
I hope it wasn't 117.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope not too. So, but obviously the direct sun is just killer. But
Well,
yes,
you're down. You're really close to the equator.
yeah, yeah, right, right, right. And I,
Actually, where Campeche is not northern. Or
mhm,
you're near Belize,
yeah,
right? And so the direct sun is a lot more direct
yeah,
there.
hmm
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah. No, no, no. It's all good. And that's why it's an afternoon start, 1 p.m. And so by the time you're getting off the bike, the sun is on the way down. and and that was actually a neat experience to do a race starting at 1 and finishing somewhere around 6ish or whatever it was. I actually not even sure. So it was, but yeah, it was a neat experience. And Campeche is a town. It's not a tourist town, and I think this is something. If someone's looking to go, don't expect tourist touristy type of amenities. It's it's really a neat area to walk around, to run around. Very colonial, Mexican colonial seaport, and Campeche is surrounded by a wall because it used to be attacked by pirates, and so there's a lot of history in that aspect, and so it was neat to be there, but it wasn't a touristy type of neat.
okay. I mean, well, let me ask you a few questions and just directly about the race because once again, it's on my list. What were the roads like for riding?
So they let me think of a comparable race. You haven't done Vineman, did you? No.
Well, actually, I have.
Okay. So
So yeah,
Vineman would be comparable
pretty bumpy
in,
then.
in terms of road surface. Even some of Oceanside, where you have that, section where you've got to be really heads up, um, which line to ride. The roads were probably 85, 90% really good highway type of road, but they got a lot of speed bumps. And
Really,
the
boy.
speed bumps were like speed bumps, like bottle ejecting speed bumps. And oh, this was another funny thing. As I hit one of the speed bumps, my rear bottle ejected. I had it rubber band in and everything, but it was just too much of a speed bump. And it popped off, and I'm riding along. I'm like, oh, do I stop? Do I not stop? And then a ref pulls up alongside me on moto and says, points, and says,
Littering.
yeah, littering. And so I turned around and went and got my bottle. So I didn't get a penalty for that. But I did go back, pick up the bottle, and I start going again. And then as I hit the next bump, I put my hand back to hold on to the bottle, and it still popped out.
With your hand on the bottle.
Yeah, because it was such a jarring speed bump. It wasn't a nice little gradual. It was a speed bump. I mean, it was designed to slow you down. And so I lost that one. So then the next time I grabbed another water bottle at the aid station, and I'm like, I'm gonna hold it in my hand, up on, as I'm going through the bar, and then I get approach the speed bump. It was so big. I'm like, I had one hand on my bullhorn, and I got the other bottle in my other hand. I hit the bump, and that bottle goes flying out, and I'm like, okay, this just isn't going to work. So then I just had to come up with a system to refill my front hydration. I would grab two bottles in each aid station, refill my hydration as quickly as possible, throw that bottle away, and then
Yep.
stick the other bottle on my down tube. And that worked from then on, but it was just bottles flying everywhere. So the speed bumps are the worst thing. And then there's also several sections where those reflectors that are on the road that they sometimes put like on the white line or
Yep.
sometimes on the side, real big round. They've got sections where they probably have 20 rows of these, cutting across the road and all offset.
Yeah. You can't go
Yeah,
through
so you can't just pick a straight line and go. You're literally trying to avoid as many as you can, and there's too many, and so you're getting slowed down. Again, it's a speed control zone, is what it is for cars.
them. Yep.
And so this is actually how I got my flat, is because on one of the sections where there's these rows of reflectors, I saw a clear path to the right of all these. And I'm like,
Okay.
oh, perfect. I'm just gonna go right there.
Don't sneak through. Yeah.
Yeah, go through. I clear them all, and I'm like, oh, that worked out really well. It's a multi-loop course, and so I'm going, oh, okay, great. I'll have to start looking for this clear path on each of them. Then all of a sudden, it felt really comfortable to be on my bike. And I'm like, oh, that's neat. I must have picked that air pressure just right. And then you go along, or I went along, and I'm feeling, oh, it's just a little softer. And then I look down, I'm like, oh, I got a flat. So I
Dang
picked up
it.
a shard of glass that
Because you went too
punctured.
far to the right, where
Yeah,
they
I
were
was
cleaning,
I was
right?
in the bad section of the road, and so fortunately, I saw a tree up ahead and on the left, and so I swung over, got in the shade, and started changing a tire. Fortunately, a support vehicle did come along while I was changing it, and he was great because he knew exactly what to do, and was able to help me out. If nothing else, it's like it's nice to have an extra pair of hands to hold the bike while you
Yeah.
do something,
Just if
and
I had someone to hold the bike,
yeah,
like
right,
that
right,
would make all the difference in the world, right?
yep, yeah, and
Uh,
so
yeah.
the to change the flat, I looked back at my training peak record, and it looked like it only took me about 7 minutes to get back riding again. So that was actually not too bad. I was pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's not bad.
So so your question on the roads, they
It's kind of
were
rough.
largely decent, but you have obstacles along the way that you've got to deal with, and the speed bumps were probably some of the worst, and then the reflectors that you have to sort of navigate through.
Awesome. And the run? How's the
Run
run?
super flat. You would love the run. I mean, you crush any run course, but the run was flat. It was a three loop course.
I love a 3 course, by the way.
Oh, do you really? Oh, that's great. I'm fine with it too, but it is a little demoralizing on that first loop where you're seeing the 10-mile marker and
Yeah, but I always put in my head, okay, when I'm there,
I know.
you know,
Yeah, but it's nice. By that time, have a little bit of sun in the beginning, and then the sun starts getting lower. I was able to see the sunset as I went along, and uh, and then although it's still warm, it was probably high 80s at that point. It felt cooler because one, being hot from getting off the bike to getting the run going, and then a little bit of breeze. It was comfortable. But at that point, as most people who are listeners might know, at that point I was set to walking. I was trying to walk as fast as I could, so I'm not generating as much heat as if I was running.
awesome. Um, it's funny you had a flat. So I actually had my first flats of the year this week. I
Oh, no.
started commuting again.
Ah, okay.
I hadn't commuted since pre-surgery stuff, and
Yeah,
you know what? It's so nice this week,
yeah,
and like just so sick of the traffic, and I'm like, I'm gonna commute. So
yeah.
first day of commuting, I think it was on, was it Monday or Tuesday? Anyways, it doesn't matter. And riding home, I'm like 4 miles away from campus. Like riding home, flat. Dang it! This is why I
Mm,
don't ride.
yeah, right.
And I, like you, like I know how to change a flat. It was probably 7 minutes, about that. And but I took my time. I went through the whole tire,
Yeah,
looking only on the inside because we're just ran through some sand.
yeah,
So I was only looking through the inside. I felt nothing. I'm like,
yeah.
oh,
Oh,
this
I hate
here,
that. I hate that.
nothing, nothing, nothing. I went through like 3 times around,
Yeah, yeah,
nothing. So I'm smart enough to call Marie, my wife. I'm like, hey, honey, just so you know, I had a flats fixed.
no.
But there's a good chance that's going to happen again because I
Hmm.
couldn't find anything.
Right.
And I'm like, just be on the ready. And sure enough, 4 miles later, second flat.
Oh,
And I was like, man, you know what? Like the fun of commuting just went away when I
yeah.
got 2 flats on my first ride home. But I commuted 2 more times this week.
Oh, good.
So yeah, something about it, because you've done it. When you get to work in the morning, having done like an hour ride into
Hmm.
campus to
Yeah.
work, you just feel good.
Oh,
Like
yeah. Right.
the rest of the day until about 4 o'clock, when you start looking at your bike, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to ride back home
Yeah.
uphill.
Hmm.
But you just do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and once in a half hour into riding home, like, okay, I feel good.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was really excited to get back to commuting this week. So
Have you flatted during a race?
only one time.
Okay.
Yeah, only one time, and it was my own stupidity.
Hmm.
Actually, we'll might as well tell the story because something that I think people should know. Is the morning of the race, it was one of those ones that you could bring your bike in the morning. So the morning of the race, I get my bike out of the car, and I kind of, oh shoot, like the tire's flat, or like, yeah. So I was like, okay, well, let's change it.
Hmm.
And similar kind of thing. I couldn't find anything in the.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't take enough time.
Hmm.
Fortunately, it was a sprint race. Well, unfortunately, because the sprint race, a flat tire really
Right.
takes you out.
Hmm.
But about 5 miles in, I flatted, and
Yeah.
then I repaired it quickly, and then finished the race. But then when I finished the run, it was flatted again. So I
Oh,
eventually found what was in the tire.
wow.
But it's like, don't you gotta. I mean, you gotta find what it was.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
there's not a cut in it, there's
Hmm.
something, right? Like, and so lesson learned once
Yeah.
again. But yeah, the only time I flatted was because of user error in a
Yeah.
race. I
Well,
mean,
I think we both talked about this, and we both think about it is you need to be prepared for a flat, and that you've got to be able to change it. And I think this is something we've talked with other athletes about is just make sure you've got all the right gear that
yeah,
you need, that you're carrying, and you know how to do it. And it's you lose time, and it is frustrating because you're sitting there watching, or people are going by you, you're not watching them, and then you get back on. How do you approach it after you had the flat and you got it fixed? What's going through your mind as you start racing again?
it was really interesting because I was like, okay, this was relatively early in my triathlon career. To be honest with you, it was, and once again, it was a sprint race,
Hmm.
and um, I was just so angry, you
Yeah.
know, and I shouldn't have. I mean, don't ride angry.
Hmm. Right.
But then I actually, kind of tunneled it into the run. I ran really well, like,
Hmm.
but kind of like pissed off running. You know what I mean? Which is
Right.
okay. Like in a sprint race, pissed off running is, I think, okay.
Yeah. 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 Right.
And actually, I had a really good run, and I think I ended up being on the podium of the race in my age group. You know what I mean? Like, but I would have. I'm sure. I think looking back, I think I would have won the race in my age group if
Hmm.
had I not flatted. But it's okay. Like it was a learning experience. It was like, once again, it was early on in my
Yeah.
racing career, and like I've never made that mistake again. Like, and we've talked about it before. Like part of the bike maintenance before a race.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a race. I would have probably used new tires,
Hmm.
um, because I only do that for big races.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even for a sprint race, I make sure now, like the night before, go through my tires, like
Yep.
actually look really, really carefully, take my
Mm-hmm.
time, have a lot of light on them,
Yep.
and see is there anything, any little piece of glass, anything that's
Yep.
embedded in. And I found little things the day before those kind of races, but I never did that before.
Mm-hmm.
But I do that now, even like even in like the simplest race. I probably should do that for like any ride, to be honest. It just
Right.
takes time. And
Well, and I think with the more common now tubeless, that makes a lot of sense to inspect the tire and look for any signs that any sealant may have come out of the tire anywhere. 'Cause, yeah, like you, I do that as well. I check it out. Mine's not tubeless, but I do look at my tires. I know before I took the trip, I really inspected them carefully. I said, okay, these tires are going to be good. I almost changed one, but I didn't. Yeah, I figured I'd get one more race out of these tires, and it worked. Yeah, other than, but the short of grass was like, it was pretty big. So it didn't matter if I had a new tire or not. I would have needed to have some something more of a barrier to keep it from flatting from hitting that piece of glass. So
it's yeah, it sometimes it's just dang luck, right? Like,
yeah.
and the other thing is, and this is once again to help avoid flats, is when I do race, and it's not like I'm sure like referees would not like this. I try and be as left as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in the gutter,
Right.
you know,
Right. Right.
because even when they clean, like
Yeah.
stuff,
It's
they,
this. Right.
they sweep it that way. Like
Yeah.
they sweep it towards the gutter,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and I know there's a lot of people that feel that's the more comfortable place for them to be is further to the right. I
Mm-hmm.
try to be as far to the left as I like
Yeah.
as I feel like I can be. That's still like legally, and I'm not blocking
Sure.
people.
Mm-hmm.
But I really try to avoid like the gutter.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for this course, they haven't done this race now for what, 2 or 3 years. So they're coming back, and there was a little bit of confusion in terms of where to ride and on what side of the road to ride on, because there was a
Oh,
couple of parts where sometimes where they took a highway
huh.
and they closed off one side of the highway, and then you had riding in the left lane, you had riding in the right side of the left. It was really, and unfortunately, there's enough confusion that on that first loop, there were 2 or 3 instances where bikers were headed straight towards each other.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I was one of them, and I realized early on that I had to really have my head up and be watching, because there were sections where we had to cross over and we shouldn't have, and by the second loop they had it all worked out, so we didn't have to do that. So there was just some confusion in terms of people directing athletes and which lane to go in, and so I mentioned that because then once you're on one side of the road, it wasn't the athlete, the pre-meeting, the athlete meeting, they said always stay to the right of whatever lane you're in. That's what they said. But that's not what was happening. People were all over the road. And so it was really a little bit confusing. But I think they'll get that worked out for the next time they do the race.
Well, like people traditionally, you ride on the side where you're from, right? So most people
Yeah.
at that in North America,
Hmm.
everyone's gonna try and like mentally, you don't even do it. You ride on the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know even. Do you remember at the St. George was it 70.3 Worlds? I think it was the first year they did it. They had us riding on the left hand side of that highway for a good section,
Hmm.
and the cones were closer to where the traffic was. So if you
Yeah.
rode on the right side of that section, you were kind of closer to oncoming traffic. So a
Yeah.
lot of people kind of veered more
Yeah.
towards the left.
Yeah.
Plus, you have international people. There was a lot of people from Australia at that
Hmm.
race, and they're
Hmm.
more comfortable on left because it's kind of similar. It was kind of like you was kind of all over, and people didn't really know
Yeah.
where to go, and that's hard when you're on a freeway like that where they.
Well, it is, because then what was happening was, like, I was staying to the right, and now I'm near the cones, but then the other group, if they're staying to the right, now we're close to each other, which makes no sense, because all it takes is for someone just to drift a little bit, and now you're running into each other. So they're gonna have to get that worked out. But going back to the flat tire and getting started again, something that I really was aware of, because I know we're talking a little bit about the heat and the hot aspect of a race. When I get started again, I'm like, I don't want to be a hero, and I don't want to try to make up lost time. because then I'm going to get into a lot of problems
Especially, yeah.
given given the heat and the humidity. And so I just got back on the bike and I tried to just be patient. I kept just telling myself, be patient, just let the race happen. You know, nothing you can do about that time lost, and really just try to you know make the right decision with intention. And I was really pleased with that, and still had you know really good ride. I was really pleased with the overall ride, even
Well,
with the flat. So
especially in a long course, like you
yeah,
have,
right.
like in a sprint, you can put out some anger,
Hmm.
like, you know what I mean, because you're not worrying about like sparing glycogen. Like
Yeah,
in your case, that's exactly what you need to do. And you know, you should kind of almost go back and look at your training peaks and see what was my heart rate for the first 10 minutes after
yeah,
that.
right,
Like,
right,
almost
right.
be proud of like keeping it down
Hmm.
that time, because it's so easy to jump back on the bike and,
Yeah,
you know, be angry and
right.
want to pass people and put
Hmm.
out much energy for that 10 minutes, and then that will come back and get you later.
No, no, you gotta still stay within yourself and keep going. Now, I was in my brain thinking, if I get another flat, what am I gonna do?
Now I'm in trouble. Where's that? Where's the sag wagon? What you should have asked at the sag wagon is like, do you have a spare tube?
I had two with me,
Oh, you
so
had two.
I did.
That's actually something I've been told people have done. I have never had this happen,
Yeah,
where like they're fixing their flat and somebody comes by and when they're like, no, no, go, go.
yeah,
You
yeah.
should ask for a tube and a CO2,
That's good. Yeah, yeah.
right? Put it in your pocket of your jersey, like if you can't
Hmm.
put it in,
Hmm.
because if you do get that second flat,
Yeah,
you're then like once like I'm like you, I race with two CO2s and
hmm.
two tubes.
Yeah,
Some people don't, but if you don't have the basically the
hmm.
double protection, basically, I think that's a
Yeah,
really good pro tip.
yeah.
Because they'll give it to you. Like, oh yeah, what
Hmm.
do you need? I need the CO2 and I need a tube. You know,
Yeah, that's a good, that is a good tip. And I actually I race with two tubes and three CO2 cartridges. That's how I always take three with me, thinking that I may be, you know, misfiring one and I want to have two more at that point. So, and because my frame has some extra storage in it, and so I can put storage in that spot, which is not used for anything else, and it doesn't really add a lot of weight. And then I put two CO2 and a tube in my rear seat bag.
weight is nothing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh,
in a
this was a flat course too, so
oh, okay, so let me ask you this, and this is going what we want to get to today. What was it like to come out of our winter and race at 99 degrees?
oh yeah, you it was hot and
And let me interrupt. Sorry, John. Like you've raced in Kona in October,
yeah.
but you still were coming off of our summer. Even though our summer was starting to dwindle, you were still coming off our summer.
No, you're right. But and it is funny. I've said that to other people who've gone to Kona is don't count on heat training in Vegas prior to Kona because it can start to get cool, and all of a sudden you're losing all your heat acclimatization even going into Kona. For this race, it you get off the airplane and you're like, yeah, it's going to be a hot day. And even while we were there, we learned quickly that we needed to be inside by 11 a.m. and not be outside because I was outside one day and we got back to the hotel and I was just drained. I was like, it's hot, just walking around, trying to get things done, and it was too much. So we'd go back in the hotel and have a nice little siesta, and then go back out, you know, 4 p.m. ish. And by then, with the sun going down, it was more tolerable. And I was trying to get a sense for what the temp would be like on race day. So that was good. But what I was doing here in Vegas, given that it's not hot, so I was going into the steam room or the sauna, you know, after my swim. And I was doing that probably 5 times a week for probably about 4 weeks prior to the event. And I was only doing about 10 to 15 minutes at a time. I probably could have worked up a little bit longer, but I think that actually did help. I don't know how much. I did not really feel like I struggled with the heat, but I only ran 3 of the 13 miles. So the rest of it
On
was,
the bike, you were still on the bike in the heat, right?
yeah,
For
bike. I felt the heat for about 4 miles, and I just backed off because I had the tailwind, and on the second loop, and with the tailwind and the heat and humidity, I could just feel, I could feel it. And so I really backed off a bit, and then I was looking forward to coming back heading into the headwind because then it gives a little bit more of a cooling effect. So yeah, it was
You get more of a cooling effect, but I think that the thing that people don't recognize is the cooling effect comes from you evaporating,
yeah, right.
right?
Hmm.
It feels cooler, but you're still dropping
Yeah,
so much water
yeah,
that, and you don't necessarily recognize it because it feels a little bit cooler.
right.
And not you, but people might not think of the amount of hydration that you actually need because you feel.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. And being, here in our winter, training, you're not, I could go for a 56-mile bike ride and I don't even need a full bottle.
Yeah.
And I'd get done and I'm like, oh, I'm not drinking much at all. But then on racing in the conditions at Campeche, I was doing probably two and a half, three bottles every hour. I lost count because of the ones that I lost at the speed bumps, but and it's hard to count what's in my hydration, my front hydration. But I was going through a lot of water, and that's not something that you can train if it's not hot. So that is a disadvantage going to a hot race during a cold where you live in a cooler environment.
Yeah, and I know this is like a big thing these days. And people talk about like sweat rates and
Yeah.
measuring your sweat rates.
Hmm.
But this is where like sweat rate training or sweat rate testing doesn't work.
Hmm.
Like we could have been doing sweat rate testing for you in
Yeah.
our lab
Yeah.
last month.
Hmm. Yeah.
We
But
could never have it 99 degrees
hmm.
and a 20-mile-an-hour tailwind,
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be. Like we can't create those conditions.
Right.
So we could have come up with you and said, "Oh, hey, John, yeah, you sweat about a liter an hour."
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah, in our lab you do, or
Hmm.
even here, like outside on the road, yeah, it's a liter an hour.
Yeah.
You're there. I mean, I'm just saying historical data on people that they've actually
Hmm.
measured these things during these races. It could be 2 to 3 liters an hour.
Yeah. That's right. And
Liters an hour is
and you can't necessarily get that all back as you're racing. It's you can drink it all, but you can't necessarily get the fluid from your stomach absorbed into your system because the fluid has to leave the stomach, get into the intestines, and that's where it's actually absorbed. And you don't have that training to absorb that fluid enough.
So there was a paper that it was actually this was on a podcast. They're talking about a paper, and they were saying that in general, it's 35 milliliters a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you and I were just sitting here,
Yeah, right.
but
That
exercise
could be absorbed.
can be absorbed.
Yeah.
But at exercise, some people, especially in the heat, can go down to 8.
Mm, interesting.
So 8 milliliters a minute is really slow,
Right, right.
right? But that's not uncommon for
Hmm.
people exercising in the heat. So they're bringing in the volume,
Yeah,
but it's not being absorbed.
right,
And
right.
and that's some of what creates gastrointestinal discontent
Hmm.
later in a race, and just that feeling of my stomach is full and
Yeah,
I can't drink anymore. And you can't because you're full.
right.
It's not because it's not absorbing.
Hmm.
And I think that there's something to be said about even training that, right? We're
Yeah.
like throughout the summer here, you could easily drink 3 liters,
Hmm.
maybe not three, maybe 2 liters of water during
Yeah.
an hour of training, and your body might start to condition to that. So I think that's an interesting one. John, should we talk really quickly about some of the physiologic adaptations that happen when we do heat acclimatization?
Sure. Yeah.
Might be good. So I know this is a big topic, mostly around like football players.
Hmm.
Most of the research has been done because there's been several football players die in the United States from heat illness. The most famous is probably Corey Stringer, and so people that know that story of he was a player in the NFL and he succumbed to heat exhaustion, heat stroke, sorry, in it's like about 20 years ago now. So that was the Corey Stringer Institute at the University of Connecticut. And one of their main missions is actually education, uh, for sports on heat and acclimatization to heat. So anyhow,
Hmm.
that being said, you can acclimatize to heat to a certain extent,
Hmm.
and but it takes time. And so you are doing things to try and help that acclimatization, but it's super tricky, right? Because you couldn't like live in
Right.
right. You can't live in your sauna,
Yep. That's right.
and even being in the sauna might be too hot, right?
Hmm.
You can't actually get a lot of volume of time in the sauna.
Hmm. Right.
The sauna is like 160 degrees.
Yeah, wanted to take my thermometer into the sauna, and I just never did. But it would be interesting to go back and figure out how hot it was. And heat rises, and so where you sit in the sauna, what level you sit actually does change what heat you're
It's best
actually.
to lay on the ground and be in
Yeah,
there than be high up and have, because think about like if you're at 180 degrees, you just
hmm,
can't withstand it. So you can't
right.
get enough time.
Hmm. Hmm.
But anyways, the physiologic things that happen, the main physiologic thing that happens, there's kind of two. One is you increase blood plasma volume.
Right.
And basically what that is you have more water in your system.
Hmm.
Some people don't like this because you actually gain weight.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Right? Like, seriously, like when people do heat acclimatization, and they're like an elite endurance athletes, and they see their weight going up, they hate that. But really,
Hmm.
you're holding on to more water, which is actually what you want, right? It's actually really an interesting thing because it's super transient. You can actually within a couple of days start to lose it.
Yeah.
So um, your plasma volume goes up, you go back into the cool, and you lose it. So
Hmm.
that's something that is a really important adaptation. The second one that's really cool is we actually change our sweat patterns.
Hmm.
So like right now, because well, you are different because you lived there for a week, but for me, who's mostly training indoors, haven't really been in a hot environment, I mostly will sweat from my forehead, my axillas, and my groin.
Hmm.
The longer you're in a hot environment, the more heat acclimatization you do, you actually will start sweating out of your arms like
Yeah.
more. Your legs will sweat more. Your
Hmm.
feet will sweat. Like all these areas will basically open up and allow you to sweat more profusely throughout the entire your entire body.
Hmm.
So there are some actual physiologic things that happen. It's not just you gain tolerance to it, like
Right. Right.
mental tolerance to the heat. There's actually things that will actually slow down. Did I miss any of the big ones, John?
No, those are all really good. I mean, there's some other nuanced ones like you get changes in heart rate with uh, heat and cooling, and there is a heat shock protein that can be influenced by acclimatization, which increases the tolerance to heat. But the whole idea of what your body's doing is it's trying to regulate core temperature. And these things, being able to increase the plasma volume, having a better way to transmit heat from internally to externally. Because remember, our muscles are generating heat all the time, especially as we're contracting them and intensity is higher, we're generating more and more heat. In fact, for 100 units of energy, we're only using about 25, 30 units of those to as effective in generating force. The other 70 units of energy are going to heat, and you have to get rid of that. Otherwise, you get too hot and have some heat injuries. And so these adaptations that you're speaking of are all designed by the body to get rid of heat internally and maintain that core temperature.
So it's interesting, right? There are some thoughts about some supplements that people could take to actually hold on to more water. Have you heard about these?
Well, no, I haven't, but I know there are supplements like creatine ends up having you hold
One,
more
right?
water.
And so this is actually being studied right now, actually at the University of Connecticut,
Oh, cool.
where they're actually this will be the first time anyone's ever studied this with endurance athletes, because we knew that if you supplement with creatine, you actually hold on to more water,
Yep.
but that translate into potentially better performance in the
Mm. Mm-hmm.
would make sense if you can hold on to more water going into the event.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people saying endurance athletes shy away from creatine because it's going to make me
Yeah. Right.
weigh a little bit more. I'm fine with weighing a little bit more if it's water,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that one's being studied. The one that's actually an interesting one, it was a banned substance for a long time, was glycerin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah,
It's not banned anymore, but
yeah.
it's been a lot of athletes have utilized glycerin, especially like ultra marathoners.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the military, they've used it for like desert warfare stuff that actually you can hold on to, preload more water.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's even been some supplements that like I've seen that have glycerin in them, and the idea behind it is it could potentially
Yeah.
help you hold on to more water. Once again, I've never tried it,
Mm-hmm.
but
I
I don't know.
haven't I haven't either, and probably similar to this line of thought is even having more carbohydrates, you can retain more
Right,
water.
you should be able to retain more water.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you mentioned sodium, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sodium is an interesting one because water follows sodium,
Yeah.
right? So there's some thought to like sodium loading
Mm-hmm.
a couple days before a hot race, where you're going to have significantly more sodium than you normally would, with a thought that that's actually going to drive water uh, into the body.
Mm-hmm.
So all interesting things. So it actually, this is, I wasn't planning to go down this road, but it's kind of a nuanced thing, like of bringing sodium in while you're exercising.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And see, this to me is like a really perplexing one,
It,
because the
it is a perplexing one. It is.
more
Yeah.
used, right? Because if you think about it, if water follows sodium
Mm-hmm.
and I put sodium in my stomach, water could go from the intestines back out, because these are passive transporters,
Right.
right? So could I actually be driving water the wrong way?
Yeah. Right. Well, there are things that influence how well a fluid is absorbed, and the salt content is one of those. The carbohydrate content of whatever if you are drinking carbohydrates, you got to know that you're going to absorb that differently than if it's just water. And there is a, more an optimal level of osmolality or substance stuff in the fluid that can accelerate absorption. And even though we talked about this as a negative, volume in your stomach does actually help with absorption. Not too much volume, but the right amount of volume will actually aid in that. And then even the temperature of the fluid will influence the absorption rate. So yeah, it is nuanced. It is, there's a lot of competing factors here that influence staying cool during exercise.
So let me ask you a question that it's my, I actually had a student ask me this question. Why can you not drink seawater
Yeah,
to,
great.
you know,
Um,
if all this salt supplementation that people are
yeah.
taking, then it would make sense that, because when you're taking that amount of salt, it's
Yeah.
basically like seawater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Die if you drink seawater, for any length of time when you're stranded
Yeah.
on the ocean. And the answer is because the osmolarity is so high that you
That is
actually
just
are
right.
pulling water out. And that's the same if you take too much salt in a race. And like, no, don't get me wrong, you need some salt in when you race, but I think sometimes some people, I'm not saying you at all, because I have no idea how much to take too much salt, right?
Yeah.
They start taking like every couple of miles a salt tablet, and I'm like, yikes, you're not really doing what you think you're doing.
Right. It's interesting because yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it's the seawater. I don't know what the salt content is of seawater, but
I think it's different in different
it's
places.
going to be pretty high. But people will take salt pills and they'll take salt tubes with them and so forth. And so it's a funny sort of paradox that you're encouraged to take salt directly, but yet drinking salt water is discouraged. Well, yeah, I don't have
And
the answer.
yeah, and I think the answer is to be careful with salt when you're
Yeah,
racing.
yeah. Mm-hmm,
Is if you think that salt is going to solve your cramping problems, and salt
mm-hmm.
is going to do this, and salt is
Right,
going to do this.
right.
Some salt, once again, with everything, right?
Yeah,
It's nuanced as far as some is good, but too much is bad, because once
mm-hmm.
again, water is going to follow where the salt is,
Right,
and if
right.
salt's in the intestines and it's not being absorbed,
Mm-hmm,
that's once again, if there's one, anyways, once the balance is off, you could actually be doing more harm than good. And
mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
got to be careful, because once water starts going that way, once again, gastrointestinal issues will follow.
Oh, that's great. And then there is the whole other side of this where you have that the hyponatremia risk where
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
have too much water and too low of a salt content that can be life-threatening. Dehydration usually just makes you stop exercising. High
Yeah.
core temperature is what kills. And then if you go the opposite end of the spectrum, it's too much pure water is also negative because it can end up with too low of a salt content inside the body. So it is one of these things that you really gotta work and balance on it. And for hyponatremia, the risk factor is higher for people who take longer in an event because they have more opportunity to drink more and in essence dilute the system more.
And they should be drinking like
Yeah,
and they just don't just drink pure water. Like once again, like we got to find that happy spot.
yeah, right.
And I get worried when people have no salt because they
Hmm.
and I get really worried when people have too much salt and they
Yeah.
get GI issues and water's being driven the wrong way.
Hmm.
And it's finding that happy spot.
Hmm.
And um yeah, it's a tricky little dance. And I don't have the answer because every environmental race will be different.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's trying to figure that out. And once again, I hate these companies. I don't hate them. I don't like the companies that do like the salt testing.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so it,
It's in that environment.
it's gonna change day to day. Yeah.
It also changes based off of your salt intake.
And sometimes the salt that you measure that's in the sweat is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right?
It is maybe reflective of what your diet is. And
It's
if you have a
totally
high salt diet, you may be a salty sweater, but not because you're a salty sweater. You're trying to keep the system balanced. And so you're getting rid of excess salt that you probably never needed in the first place.
so. Is the answer to put more salt in for you?
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the dehydration and the heat stroke and the death. And
Hmm.
so we were fortunate to have the director of that institute come and speak at UNLV.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he articulated was that basically nobody dies of dehydration in America,
Yeah, right.
right? Because you will stop.
Yeah, that's right. And it's amazing how much that pitch of dehydration is bad. Yes, it is bad. It slows you down, but
You,
that's
you,
not what's going to kill you.
yeah. Racing in North America, like
Hmm.
no, and sorry, triathlon racing,
Yeah.
where there's water available a lot of places. Even if they run
Hmm.
out of water, you'll just start
Yeah.
walking.
Hmm.
Right? You don't die of that. You die of heat stroke.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right.
But
It's hmm.
the other thing he mentioned is you rarely see anyone die of heat stroke in long races.
Hmm.
Where you see this is in, he said, between 10K and 15K is
Right,
where they
right.
see the
Because the
most
intensity. Yeah.
intensity, right?
Hmm.
Because, like you were saying, you're generating so much heat because of
Hmm.
the intensity you're going at.
Hmm.
In a 70.3 race, you're not going hard enough
Hmm.
to get the temperature up high enough,
Yeah.
even if it's a hot race.
Hmm.
I mean, have we ever seen? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't. I'm not saying I know all the literature. I don't think I've ever seen a report of a death in long distance triathlon in North America from heat stroke.
Well, there are deaths during a marathon, and if you are going to die in a marathon,
During an Ironman.
oh, during a marathon, no, I'd have to look at the date, but no, the if you're going to die in an Ironman, it's in the first 200 meters of the swim. That's the
Right.
biggest risk factor. But dying down the run is not as common. There's been, I don't know how many off the top of my head. There's been a few on bike crashes, um, but
But
yeah,
I'm saying no one with heat stroke. That's what I'm
right,
saying. Like
right.
that heat is the cause,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? So once again, you're going to slow down, and
That's right,
you're not going hard enough
right.
to generate the heat. Once again, in a shorter race, once again, your sprint triathlon
Yeah.
maybe, but
Mm-hmm,
probably not. It's too short.
mm-hmm.
Like that's the other thing he said. Like a 5K, you rarely ever see it
Right,
because as the temperature goes up, you finish.
right.
Right. But he said like the 10, 15K was the where we see the runners
Yeah,
that
no, you're spot on. And this is when I talk with people about hydration, I don't talk with them about hydration to avoid dehydration because Actually, some of the fastest people are going to be the most dehydrated at the finish line. And there's some good data on this. You are in a risk of dehydration and injury due to dehydration and possibly death if you lose 20% of your body weight in fluid, something to that matter. That's a lot of weight. I'm 194, so let's just round that off to 200, and 20% of my body weight, that's 40 pounds. That means I'm going down to 160 pounds, and that is a risk factor for dying. And when we start doing things like putting on those sweatsuits, and I mean the ones that are plastic, trying to retain heat, people who are trying to cut weight, like wrestlers, fighters, that can be a risk factor for them when they're trying to lose that much weight because through fluid, because it puts a big risk on kidneys in particular. But in normal races, we're drinking and we're hydrating to keep our core temperature down. That's the whole issue. It's not avoiding dehydration. It's avoiding getting your core temp going up.
Awesome. I love that we're going down this road,
Mhm.
especially before long, it's going to be summer here
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we do races and
Mhm.
uh, yeah, so awesome. Awesome. That was a good synopsis of this.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you, I did take a core temp pill for Campenchi, but the
Oh,
data have not transferred over to the monitor. I've contacted the company. I'm like, I need this data.
we
And
need this data.
yeah, I
I should have
really,
gave you my core monitor. Oh, we should have done the core monitor too.
yeah,
The core
yeah,
monitor and been able to compare the
yeah,
data during that
yeah,
race.
right, right, right. So we'll see if I can get it. Fortunately, I still have the core temp pill with me.
Awesome.
So it has not left the system yet. But yeah, it is.
It's
Yeah,
still in you?
it is still in me because the monitor is still recording data. I've got it,
You just
but
can't get the data off.
it's not transferring over to the computer, and so it stopped transferring data at 9 a.m. on race day when I left it in the hotel room, and it won't transfer any data. So I gotta. I'm still pushing the company to try to help me out, try to figure out what to do. I want the data.
Yeah, I want to see the data too. Hopefully we can share it on our podcast next week.
Yeah,
We'll have
yeah, yeah. Let's hope. I hope we can. So awesome. Well, good talking.
awesome. And just so you know, for the people that are following along with this, that means he ingested a thermistor pill
Yeah, yeah,
and it's in his system still.
yeah.
You know, I did it for a few races as well, and man, it was an extra burden on you as
It
far as
is.
like,
Yeah,
getting everything set up and
yeah, yeah,
how
yeah,
you take it, making sure it's
yeah,
connected, and all these things. I'm like, it was super cool to get the data,
yeah.
but the effort, like, so I really want you to get the data because I know the effort it takes
Yeah. Hmm.
to
Yeah.
actually get the data.
It is. It's a, it's one more logistic thing that you don't want to have to worry about. And I was ready to abandon the idea if I felt it was going to be too burdensome. But fortunately, I felt I had everything set up going in to the race, and but obviously something went wrong. So I've got to figure out. But it is interesting. I mean, that does sort of speak to, even though I feel really fine after that 70.3 because I didn't have to run as much, or I couldn't run as much. That is where a lot of your muscle damage is going to happen. So I don't have that type of muscle damage, but yet your system's still pretty jacked up after a race like that and hot and humid. So you do still need to take time to let your body recover.
There's a neurologic load,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, right.
Actually, I think the load is not always just neurologic; it's also endocrine. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's something about when you are racing or even when you're training, the training gets tough and you switch over into this response of cortisol and adrenaline, that actually takes a toll on you. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people appreciate the toll of the hormonal system.
Right, right.
And because we can dig deep, and part of digging deep, especially like when things, your nutrition is not perfect, your hydration is
Mm-hmm.
not perfect, and you're like, I can gut this out.
Yeah,
The gutting it out is the endocrine system. It's the hormonal
yeah.
system that's allowing you to do that, and you have to pay that back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't recognize that. Like, oh yeah, my legs feel fine. Oh, okay, good. But you know what? There's other systems in your body, not just that. And then even things like the heat, like your kidneys were working really hard
Yep,
that day.
that's right.
And so there's other systems that are going, even your GI system, once again, not used to taking in that volume of water and processing that there's a penalty to be paid for racing, and
Yep.
we need to recognize that.
No, no,
So,
spot on.
awesome. All right, hey, have a great week, and we'll be back next week.
All right, sounds good. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.